So we've talked about two different kinds of plans during the morning. The first time that a house is constructed, that first plan is really different from the ones that we go back to 5 years later. The first thing is there's no home, and there's no landscaping. So the thing that we come across most often is an abundant understory, if it's a treed environment, or a continuous shrub field, if it's near a shrub, or probably not so much a grass, because in the homelands often they've been already mowed. But the first time that the first field management plan is distinctly different from one that is an update. So for many, many years, we were only doing first plans. And so it was wonderful. But we really appreciated how important that first plan is, because it sets the trajectory of the vegetation perhaps in a very long-term way. If, for example, we remove those obligate seeding species, and we don't know 5 years later that they were even there, we wouldn't know how important they are to protect. So that first selection of species to retain and the density of the vegetation to retain is super important in that first vegetation and first treatment. And so hats off to the implementers, because you guys, when implementing the plan, are making a lot of those selections, and again, making a long-term impact. So that's a really big thing about the first plan. Often if in the first time you trim the trees up too high, those branches don't grow from the bottom, they grow from the top, so that those bottom branches are gone for like forever. So over-treating can actually damage the biodiversity. And okay, so when you first, it's another pitch to when you're first looking at and implementing these first plants, really look for those sensitive plants, such as the milkweed here. Okay. When we get to come back and the house is built and the landscape is in and it's gorgeous and it's grown for 5 years, that's a really different look. Our emphasis at that point is the landscaping, because we have new standards regarding landscaping, and we want to perhaps establish the spacing that's required by the field management standards now. So a retrofit is often in order. But many times the native vegetation outside the landscape zone has already been treated and it's in maintenance mode. So a lot of it is, okay, that's kind of in control, and we'll look to see if there's any touch-ups. But truly, usually the updates, there's a whole lot more information and focus on landscaping. So just as a heads up, when you see these plans, if the house has already been built, there's going to be a lot of diagrams and pictures about landscaping. I think that's it. Now Esther's just going to talk about the maps that she produces in it.
They're pretty basic. This is a list of the maps. It's just the aerial map, a topography map, a vegetation map, a flame map, fuel management zones map, and what we think the flame length might be post-treatment. And that's important because, and shorelands. And so the aerial map, pretty simple. It's just going to show, and the reason why we have this in it is primarily to show, it's a recent aerial of what the vegetation is like on the property, what the conditions are, and it kind of just gives you a sense that, okay, there's this band of vegetation. The homeland is do we have a pointer? Maybe not. Oh, I see why it didn't work. It is shown, this is that funky shaped homeland that they were talking about. It's probably trying to avoid this, I'm assuming the riparian area based on the vegetation. And so this is just there to give you a sense of what the vegetation is like, the lay of the land, and the proximity of the homeland to the rest of the property. So this is the home, and this is the entire property, and this is the open land. right? So just general overview. We include the topography map, again, to get a sense of what the lay of the land is. There's a ridge over here. This is along Camisole Ridge. There's Robinson Canyon Drive, so we know that this is a big canyon where a lot of the winds get funneled through. So, again, just to get us a sense of, if we got a fire that's burning down here, how likely is it going to get drawn up that canyon into the house? And there it is, right on top of a little small knoll, and just tries to give us an idea of what sort of fire behavior, what the fire behavior could be on the entire property. And then there's a vegetation map, and this is the data from the Santa Lucia Conservancy vegetation layer. This particular property has a nice band of chamise over here. We have huge stand grass. It's hard to see, but that's coastline oak, and the house is surrounded by coastline oak. And a nice band, if we go back and look at the topography, this is lower, this is higher, and we have this small band of chamise beneath it. So of course that's going to inform what the fuel zones are going to, fuel management is going to be. Oops. The flame length map, again, this is a model. This is based on the land fire data. So the resolution is about 30 meters, but each pixel that's shown on there is about 30 meters by 30 meters. And so it's rough, but it does show that, your worst fire behavior based on the conditions that we ran the model at are going to be along this drainage because it's the denser vegetation. And again, it's the topography there. It's being drawn up. And so, this will be an area of concern. It's not, obviously it's not right next to, surrounding the property because it's on that knoll, the fire behavior dampened down until, but it just shows us what the areas that we should be concerned about. And then, based on all that information, on all those layers that we look at, and based on the site visit, we develop what we call fuel management zones. And this obviously isn't set in stone. There isn't flags out there that are showing you that this is the end of the zone. It's meant to give you an idea that you don't have to do, when we say to do that 150 feet of Oakland woodland zone, it doesn't have to go, it's obviously not going to be surrounding the entire property because, the Oakland woodland zone is only right there, so you don't have to do, and you wouldn't because it's all grass, but we're not saying you have, it's not a uniform, yeah. And then this is the after, and actually I'll move to the next one because this shows you side by side. So this, and again, it's just to give you a sense of if you do all the treatments, your flame lengths or surrounding the property are going to be reduced. That's the whole goal, right? I can't remember what. I remember now. So what should you focus on the plans? What are the main things that you should look at? Do you want, obviously we all don't have, I think some of these are like 30 pages, some of them are close to 60 pages long, depending on what is going on the lot, and you're probably not going to read the whole thing. We don't expect you to, most people are not going to read the whole thing. So what do you want to concentrate on? You want to concentrate on the fuel management zone map, because that'll just give you a quick snapshot of what you need to do and what treatment zones that you're going to, and also in this particular one, there's some of it is outside of it. These two lots right next to each other. you want to make sure that, well, that's going to be an issue. You're going to have to deal with that somehow. And you want to concentrate also on the images and captions, because we're going to, don't do that. Don't let that accumulate there. And then the other thing to concentrate on is that anything that is bold, italics, and underlined is going to be an exception or some sort of special consideration. So when you're reading them, you might, and you see those are the things to hone in on. And so we're going to go through and talk about each of those things in more detail.
Thank you. We're going to get into the images and captions. We have talked about this already. Carol did a great job talking about the branches heading up, the branches heading down, and 8 feet or 1/3 the height of the tree for trees that are 24 feet or taller. I think you saw that question on here, so thought I'd point that out again. Okay, so in every field management plan there's going to be images and captions. And this really is a lot of the meat of the plan here that you really want to pay attention to. These are illustrations, they're photos, and photos can somehow, sometimes feel like the perspective is a little off or the distortion, but we do the best we can. So it's, the point is it's an illustration. We count on the experts that are out there doing the work to, know how to prune and get the general idea of what we're talking about. And if there's anything you don't understand in these, we're always open for feedback and questions. So here is an illustration of, tree branches should be trimmed to a height of 8 feet from the ground or 1/3 the height of a tree, whichever is less. In this caption, it says 150 feet of structure. It might say 200 feet of structure. That is going to change. So this is just showing you one kind of an example. So pruning, if this is 8 feet, it's not necessarily a straight line, but you get the idea. This is assuming all these trees are over 24 feet tall. These trees, if they're 12 feet tall, you'd only be trimming them up about 4 feet. These trees are even a little shorter, so maybe they only get trimmed 3 feet. Easy enough, right? We got a lot to eat with me. Sure. You can see it. Whoa, that was good food. Okay, here again, we've talked about this a little bit, the ladder fuels. These are the kind of things that you're going to see in the fuel management plan, and you'll see captions to go along with these things. So, although we're showing it again, we're just trying to show what you will see in the plan. These little diagrams here, a tree, 6 feet away you've got a shrub. These kind of diagrams are in every plan. And these kind of captions, it depend on the images, depending on what's going on a particular property. Here again, these kind of photos can be hard to illustrate, but we do the best we can. So what we have here is a big row of Manzanita right along the driveway. So what we want to do is separate that. So these yellow circles with an X just represent some kind of separation in these shrubs. So, we can make 1, 2, 3, 4 bushes out of this, or whatever you as these professional landscapers deem to look at. We want to target the removal of the shrubs with the highest amount of dead. So if you look at this hedge effect here, this hedge has a lot of dead in it. You can see it down here. A lot of times what happens is it's green on the outside, but you take a little peek on the inside and it's really got a high volume of dead. So this is really flammable. It is up against a rock wall, so it's not up against a house. If it's up against the house, it would be in non-combustible zone, and we'd say take it out. You have some choices here. You can break this up. We had an earlier slide showing that lavender that was cut all the way to the ground and started to resprout, and those new sprouts are a lot higher in fuel moisture. They're very pliable. They're not woody yet. It takes a while for that. So you as landscapers can make some decisions here along with the homeowner, whether you want to chop this up, make different shrubs out of it. It's got too much dead, let's take it out, let's get some new shrubs. Let's trim it down, let's get some new sprouting. Let's take it out and get some fire-resistant plants in there. There's some options. And we talk about those in the plan with specific captions. It is, remove shrubs with a high volume of dead material. It's really important. We see it an awful lot. And I think a lot of times the homeowners don't see it. They're not, they're looking in the bushes like we are. There we go. Okay, so here we go. Before, and we've seen this one before, you know, where these manzanitas are separated. We have the mass of manzanita here. That's been cleared out. And now we have 3 separate manzanita shrubs. Still looks really nice. Looks better, I think. That's a judgment call. But that's the kind of work we're looking for, particularly in manzanita. Now here, we've got some great shrub separation here, although it's probably not a lot of growing room there before those things grow together. So that's a consideration when you're looking at how much to plant. Here's another one of those manzanita things. Maybe you want to make that into 2 shrubs. Maybe you want to make it into 3 shrubs. There again, you as the landscapers have some latitude to make that look, you know, you get the idea here. Trim it back, shorten it. You shorten it, it grows well, you get less dead, you take care of it, and you provide some shrub separation. Yes? You have a question? No, no question. Okay. How are we doing?
Customer's going to love you for doing that.
They're gonna?
Customer's going to love you for doing that.
Okay.
I did ask the question, just to help me understand the fire.
It's going to be tough.
Does creating these small separations, is the cumulative impact that the flame lengths are drastically reduced? Is it less likely to torch? Could you help me understand and be able to describe to people who might need to do this?
Yeah, if you have a mass of shrubs like this, you're going to have a wall of flames. That's what you're going to have. If you have individual shrubs, you're going to have spots of flame. It's a lot different when you're a firefighter working with things like that because you don't have the wall of flame when you don't have the wall of shrubs. So it is a lot less than fire intensity.
And also regarding radiant heat, the radiant heat is a function of the length of the line and the depth of the and so by having it spotty, you really reduce the radiant heat that both the house and the firefighters will feel. So it's that space is actually going down the radiant heat.
And radiant heat is that which you would feel if you were standing next to a campfire. You know, the closer you get, the hotter it gets. That's the radiant heat. So the hotter it gets, the harder it is for firefighters. Good at it, Carol, thanks.
Catherine?
Yes?
Just, you helped me understand yesterday when we were going through these, my question was, why shorten the shrubs? Why pull them down, right?
Yeah, and so the shrubs that, you know, as they get taller, and they just become more of that mass, that becomes more fire intensity, more, it's kind of the concept we were just mentioning. And trimming them down, I'll show you some more about Manzanita here. You have an opportunity to take out some of the dead, you have an opportunity to freshen it up. This kind of Manzanita comes back pretty well. So it might look a little stark at the very beginning when you first do it. That depends on your perspective, because I think that other slide you showed there, I think it looks pretty good. And this was taken just, you know, within a few days after that work was done. So it's perspective, but thanks, Christy.
Yeah, the other point that was really persuasive to me is the taller the plant, the taller the flame length.
Yes.
And the farther the distance to the next plant.
Yep.
So if you want to keep something tall, you're going to have farther clearance this way. So in a setting like this, not bringing it down actually allows you to retain other
Right, right. I mean, more short plants, or tall plants, less plants. You know, it does come back to that volume of material.
So, can I just?
Yes.
So basically, I mean, pruning like this, if you're not going to do it with a trimmer and just make everything into meatballs, it's like a lot of hand pruning. So I guess it's up to us as designers to really pick plants that naturally kind of top out at a certain height or have natural form if we want natural form.
That is an excellent. I'm going to hand you the microphone so,
That's-
because I love what you just said. Say that.
So I'm looking at that and saying that, thinking that to prune those individual plants takes hand pruning to keep natural form if you don't want them to look like meatballs by someone who is an untrained in pruning, which I think we don't. Then it's our job as designers to pick plants that have a natural form and kind of top out at the right height and shape so that we're not putting incredible maintenance burdens on our clients. And yeah.
And that's exactly right. You know, picking the right plants in the beginning is an excellent point. And you also have an opportunity to pick the fire-resistant plants. So I'm really glad that you said that because as you're refreshing landscaping, as you're doing brand new landscaping, all those things that you want to take into consideration in plant selection. So that's awesome. Thank you. So here, see this a lot. So here's some manzanita. It's all green on top, a lot of dead underneath. Rosemary is notorious for having a lot of dead under there, and it smells great. It's wonderful. I love to cook with it, and it's really pretty when it's in bloom, and it is got a lot of dead in it. This here, same thing. It's all dead underneath. This here. So I want you, when you're looking and doing your landscape maintenance, I want you to look for the dead material. Look inside these shrubs. How much dead is in there? There's more dead than there is live. You've got to consider doing something different in that area. Because, I mean, they don't last forever, right? I mean, I love my plants in my yard, and I realize I need to refresh them once in a while. Whatever that means, whether it means, you know, cutting all the way to the ground or putting something new in there. There's options. But look for dead. That's a big one. Shrub spacing, we've talked a lot about that. You've seen this diagram. This is going to show up in all of our fuel management plans. Mowing. So, in these fuel management plans, we show you areas of improvement that need improvement. We also show you areas that look good. So we might say that mowing's done to a proper height of 4 inches, and they're doing it to an appropriate distance. That might be just, 30 feet, it might be 50 feet, it depends on the individual home, because we're looking at the whole landscape, the topography, the fuels, and anticipating the weather about what we might need in a situation like that. So, then we'll give you the timing. Christy went over the timing, usually late spring to early summer, before it gets too dry and we risk ignition. Dead limbs, we've also talked a lot about that. I really encourage you to move limbs if you can over 8 inches, if they have to be moved, rather than dispose of them, because they really are so valuable. So here's one that's over 8 inches. It's probably under a tree canopy, so we don't really want that. But they can stay, if we remove the small material associated with them, that material less than 8 inches, the little branches and such, and leave the limb when you can. Keep it at least 100 feet away from the structure, not under a tree, and it can remain. This is all material less than 8 inches. It's also in a driveway zone. We want to get rid of that kind of material. Always. Here's a property where before the limbs were over the roof, and you can see they did some good tree work and trimmed those back. Still got a nice tree there, but just some before and after images of some of the work right next to the house. Leaves. Talked a little bit about leaves too. Leaves accumulate in these kind of roofs, the tile roofs, where you have all the little valleys. You get leaf accumulation once a year, cleaning those leaves off the roof. Leaves 4 inches deep. Carol talked about the foot. We get out the boot, we know there's a lot of leaf accumulation. And so what happens sometimes, this property here, this is where the tree was trimmed and it looks great, and we got great shrub separation here, and this has been raked, which looks great. When it's in the non-combustible zone, that's where, we like the bare ground in non-combustible zone. When you get away from that, we are, the bare dirt is good for non-combustible, but it also does leave it open for weeds, and we're concerned about weeds too, so a little bit of leaf litter is okay. When this is raked or blown, and sometimes these piles can accumulate, eventually that's going to catch up to you. Eventually you're going to get leaves that are over 4 inches and they're going to be piled high, and you're just going to have to remove them because you've already moved them all around the property and there's no more room for more leaf accumulation. So it will depend on, how fast this regains leaf litter. Maybe it's really fast because there's lots of oak trees. There are a lot of oak trees on this property. Maybe you only have one oak tree, so it's not going to go too fast. So it's that conundrum between bare dirt, which is good for fire, and not so good for getting weeds. So a little bit of leaf accumulation is okay. This much leaf accumulation is just too much. So, defensible space is a good thing. We talked about why we need to do it. It's important to do it. We need to follow the law. We need to protect our homes. We need to protect our firefighters when they're defending our homes. It's about their safety too. So treatments that are too intense, talk a little bit about that, can be harmful for biodiversity. So if we mow the grass too short, we get down to the dirt, or we mow it out of season, we're risking those invasive weeds. So the 4-inch height is a good height, we want to stay with that. Or if we were to remove all logs when we don't need to, that are greater than 8 inches, that's too much also. So we need to be careful about that. We've heard a couple of times today how important these logs are. And they really are. This one's under a tree. This one I think is also rotten, this particular one, but if it wasn't, could be maybe drug out a little bit. I think it's worth the effort to drag it out and leave it there, personally, rather than cut it up and get rid of it, because they're so important for biodiversity. And then we talked about the branches, just removing healthy branches over 3 inches. If you removed them over 3 inches of diameter, that's only going to be allowed in specific incidents. So with that, any questions on this one? Okay, one question over here. Go ahead.
I'm trying to understand the leaf litter mulch difference.
Oh, it's tough.
What's the difference between 1.5 inches of leaf litter good and 2 inches of mulch bad?
It's about the same, really. I mean, it really is. And I'm telling you, because we can talk all day about this, and I lived this when I was in the Lake Tahoe Basin with the pine needles. That the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency wants pine needles all the way up to people's houses because they want to protect water quality and the clarity of Lake Tahoe. And the fire departments want the defensible space. And, in that situation, the fire departments were kind of letting the water agency have their way, and then after we had the Angora fire and burned down 256 homes and people were mad, now it's switched. Now the fire agencies are getting what they want, and the water districts are having to say, okay, it's okay. We're not going to require pine needles up to the home. I think it's a tough issue. I mean, there's benefits to mulch. There's absolute benefits to mulch. It is flammable if it gets too deep. We're saying 4 inches, and we have that defensible space law. We're trying to, you know, do a little bit of everything here and protect homes and protect plants and protect from invasive weeds. And it's, we'd like it to be cut and dry, but it's a tough one. If Christy was here, I'd invite her to speak right now. We have some great discussions over this stuff. It's good, but it's a good question. Other questions? Yes.
I'm having some trouble making sense of the fuel management guidelines close to the house compared with the spirit of the design guidelines, which is very much to have natural landscaping that blends with the environment. And like a lot of those examples with the kind of overly pruned plant material and bare dirt next to the house just seems to be a little bit at odds with the design guidelines in terms of like more drifts of plants and a bigger impact that blends more with the environment.
Yeah. Do you want to speak to the design stuff at all, Lindsay? Or I don't see Christy here right now, because I can't really speak to the design stuff. I can speak to, and there's Christy, or Lindsay, want to come up and answer that? Or, go ahead. We'll let Lindsay talk to that.
Repeat the question.
So yeah, the question was about the natural aesthetic that the design review board and the design guidelines are trying to achieve in the landscaping within the homeland, and how that is reconciled with the style of pruning and management of vegetation. So that's a very appropriate question. A lot of times with the kind of fuel fire-friendly landscaping, we're looking to keep it natural but remove the dead material. So in some instances, especially with Manzanita, it can appear bonsai or really ornamental. For the more fire risk or high fire risk vegetation, that is more desirable if it's going to be within that 30-foot zone. I think it's more achievable to go to a natural transition from the built home into the open lands if we're looking at the more succulent or native grass options. But it is a balancing act between creating a fire-safe landscape that is also achieving those natural aesthetics.
Yeah. So when I went through the various vegetation types, I purposely gave you guys what it would burn like. And so we learned from that mowed grass really burns in a pretty benign way, low flame lengths, low spread rate. And the other winner is the oak woodlands. So with those in mind, those are the two really compatible, easy things to reconcile or join together, the design with natural features. And in contrast, North Coastal Scrub and chaparral is just a real bear. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Good question.
And just to wrap that up, I am seeing more of a desire for zero landscaping with the new homes that are being built. So it's more, how do I enhance what's already here on my lot? How do I enjoy the structure of the valley oaks that are in my auto core? And kind of minimizing the amount of vegetation they're adding to the landscape and using what's already there and restoring what they might have lost in construction.
Yeah, quick question. You gave us a sheet with this California native strain form. Do you have somewhere a database of plants that are listed as, pyrophytic versus non-pyrophytic?
There's not one specific for the preserve area. However, those criteria are things that you as folks that know all these plants can make those criteria, make those judgments, and maybe it'd be a good idea to make one for the preserve. But what I found was over the years, there's always a new plant. How do we put that in? And as I mentioned, that the plants often lists often conflict with each other. So or new varieties appear. So use those criteria for making your own decisions. Okay. Any other questions?
And one other thing I wanted to add to what you said with your question. I mean, this is why we have lot-specific fuel management plans, and I'm showing you examples, and each lot's going to be a little bit different. They have their own unique character. So I wanted to mention that. I came back to this slide because something somebody said here. We sort of saw this just during the slideshow. So this is that Mexican feather grass that Chrissy was talking about. This is bad. Gotta get rid of that. We don't want it to spread. So, it looks like what?
Volunteer, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, they wouldn't plan it.
Right, yeah, it's a volunteer, but we don't want it to spread.
That's right.
So that's that, what Christy said is kind of just starting to show up on the preserve. We talked about it yesterday. It was the first I had heard about that one, and we talked, it was right here in this picture, and we know where that is, and we'll get that message out. So, that's it. So if there's no other questions, we're going to get ready to go outside and do the field portion of this training. We're going to give everybody a few minutes to, you know, if you need to change your shoes, get a coat. It's probably warmer outside than it is inside. But just a minute, Lindsay's going to give you a couple logistics here, and then we're going to get going.
All right, so just before this last section, we gave everyone a post-test. If you would please fill that out and take that in your pre-test and leave it on the registration table as you go outdoors, that would be great. Highly recommend you grab some water, go to the bathroom, do all the things you need to do before we go outside. And at 2:15, we'll meet right outside the event barn and take a picture. And then I'll divide everyone into two groups. Half of you will stay with Kathy and I, the other half will go with Esther and Carol, and then we'll switch. Does that sound good?
Sounds good. Perfect.
Thank you, everyone.